Back. Thank you, Chuck Berry, bringing us back to school. Hey, we forgot to say happy autumnal equinox. That is today. Equal day, equal night. We got sunshine, we got coolness. It's a comfortable day in Chicago. And it is a magnificent day in Chicago if you were part of the red-shirted masses for the last 2 weeks who made something really special happen here. And all of us who are not teachers, who are not in a union, were watching with great admiration as a really democratic thing occurred in our city. And I'm so glad that Michael managed to get our buddy Mike Klonsky up here this morning to run it down for us. Mike, welcome back.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, Mike.
It's always good to have you, comrade, brother.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, so now let's just, right from the top, you are not a school teacher in the CPS system, right?
No, I'm...
Tell us what you do.
I'm semi-retired now. I teach at DePaul in the College of Education. But I'm also the director of something called the Small Schools Workshop, which for the last 22 years has been working with Chicago public schools and schools all across the country to help them rethink and redesign public schools that are too large, too anonymous, overcrowded, and things like that. Yeah.
Didn't the Small Schools Workshop kind of wasn't involved in the early days of what we had hoped would be a more progressive movement, the charter school movement?
Well, actually, you're right, Mike. What's now known as charter schools actually grew out of the small schools movement, although back in the early 90s, charter schools represented something far different than they do today.
Right.
Yes, that's for sure.
At that time, they were small schools that were organized and led by teachers. And the idea was to give teachers more autonomy, more power, more control over their environment. And of course, today charter schools and the charter school, what was called the charter school movement, has been pretty much been taken over by these corporate reformer types and private companies who've come in to manage public schools.
This makes it very difficult for people out there to stay clear on stuff. What you just described, that takeover, because there are also still existing some small schools or charter schools that are not corporate-minded.
That's right.
Isn't that true?
That's right. Some of them have managed to survive. Some of the good ones have managed to survive. But it's a tough uphill battle. It's like mom and pop stores trying to compete with Walmart or something like that. Yeah. You know, now you have these big networks of well-financed charter schools like KIPP, like Chicago International, and Uno also. And what's happened is teachers, instead of having more power, more autonomy, have actually been turned into something nearing delivery clerks. I mean, they're just there to pass on a prepackaged curriculum and program that the boards of these charters have created.
So there is a prepackaged curriculum
in each school, in each company, in each management company. They're called CMOs, charter management organizations, and they usually have very wealthy people sitting on the boards, and they're very well financed. From by Broad Foundation, by Bill Gates Foundation, or with the Walton Fund. They get millions of dollars more than regular public schools do, and the other thing about them, which is appropriate to our discussion today, is the teachers in those schools are not allowed by law to be part of the Chicago Teachers Union.
So if a teacher was in a charter, one of these schools,
privately run charter schools,
would they have to give up their belonging to the union?
Yes.
Huh?
Yes, they cannot.
The other thing about these teachers is they do not need to have certification by the state, the same kind of certification.
No, they don't need to have that certification, although more and more of them are becoming certified, because as they're closing
regular
public schools, especially in black and Latino communities around Chicago, thousands of teachers have lost their jobs, and some have no choice but to go work in a charter school for less money and with less rights. I mean, the teachers in these schools, they can be fired arbitrarily, you know, and increasingly that's true with Chicago public school teachers as well. That's one of the reasons why we had a strike.
All right, the first charter school, I believe, in the Rogers Park area was the Chicago Math and Science Academy, and it started over at
St.
Jerome's Church, and now it moved up into what was the International Mall on Clark Street, and it's a nice facility. But I understand that the teachers there did vote to have a union, and they did, where they were challenged by the management, and they took it to the NLRB, National Labor Relations Board. They won, but still they don't have a union. Do you know about this situation?
Yes. The AFT, the American Federation of Teachers, and the Illinois Federation of Teachers have developed a campaign to try to organize charter school teachers, and they've gotten a lot of good response from teachers in charter schools. But as they've gotten a majority of the teachers in those schools to sign union cards, the charter management companies have responded with a huge campaign to try and smash them. They figured out the teachers who were pro-union, and they fired them. They've gone to the courts and the NLRB, and they've argued. This is an interesting argument. They said the Illinois Labor Relations Board doesn't have any jurisdiction over this because why? They say charter schools are not public schools. See, all along they've been arguing that charter schools were public schools because they get public money. But when it comes to union busting, suddenly they say we're private schools, and the reason they say that is they say, look who signs the teachers' checks. It's a private company. It's not the Chicago Public Schools, and so they switched arguments in order to keep the unions out.
Well, this makes it. What you just described is something that's very hard for regular Joe and Mary on the street.
That's right.
Not connected with the schools, not having kids in the system to keep track of. So when the strike, let's talk about the strike.
Okay.
Well, let me ask one more thing on the charter schools before we shift over. We have a situation in our neighborhood.
Good thing we planned this out, you know.
It is planned. One of the things that we kind of pride ourselves on in this community is that we have a lot of different folks from different races, religions, nationalities, and those kids, a lot of them have kids that go to schools in the community. And there is an opportunity for a kind of international, interracial, cross-class experience in a number of the Rogers Park schools. We have a wonderful, wonderful private school, St. Scholastic Academy, up on Ridge Avenue, and the sisters there decided that it was time that they had to look out for their retirement and stuff, and they turned the school over to, they were trying to rent it to various schools, and it was taken over by UNO, which has a focus, even though they'll say it's more multinational, on Latinos. So you had some of the kids who were doing better, Latino kids in our schools, in our community, get pulled out of the schools.
Right.
And I know some principals are concerned about that as well as teachers, and it doesn't bode well, I don't think, for the kind of international cross-race, cross-class image that we have of our community.
Well,
it segregates it.
It's a good point, Mike. Our schools are becoming increasingly more segregated, racially segregated. That's true in the Chicago public schools, where now only about 7% of Chicago public school students are white anymore. So there's been this fleeing from the Chicago public schools on the part of white
It's been going on for many years.
It's been going on for many years. And the interesting thing is that the growth of charter schools has only made it more segregated. What's going on now is a resegregation of schools, and charter schools play a big part of that.
Get that. Resegregation of our public schools.
Well, I mean, it started when I was growing up on the Southwest Side. It was clear that Mayor Daley, the original, and his buddies thought nothing of putting the Willis wagons into inner city school parking lots to keep the segregation going. And because all their kids were going to Catholic schools. I went to a Catholic school all the way through college. I mean, a lot of white kids in Chicago went to Catholic schools, and they were just as segregated as what you're describing is happening again now.
They had black Catholic schools and white Catholic schools
Yeah.
for a long time.
But what's interesting now, Mike and Katie, is that what I mean by resegregation is that white middle-class families are moving back into the city now, whereas the period
Right.
you're talking about, they were fleeing the city.
Right.
But in order to attract them now, the mayor's plan is to create separate schools for them, for the middle class.
Yeah.
Selective enrollment schools in the high schools and elementary schools, and then charter schools for some charter schools for middle class kids and some charter schools for the poorest kids.
Well, one of the things that's sort of in the transition to the recent strike and the situation of our public schools today is that I've seen a lot of teachers in this community be really concerned about the quality of education and what goes on in the schoolroom, and it seems to me that the struggle that the Chicago Teachers Union has been involved with the Chicago public school system really addresses issues of great importance, whether it be the content of the classroom, who gets to go to the schools, how the teachers are prepared in terms of their things they have to use in the classroom, etc. So let's start talking about the situation today.
Well, it's interesting. You're right. The strike and the whole contract struggle brought up a lot of issues. I mean, the wonderful thing about it is that the struggle of these teachers, which is usually, when you think of union contract negotiations, you're usually talking about pay and benefits. But the teachers union here managed to bring up all kinds of issues having to do with class size, having to do with the way teachers are evaluated, having to do with the school closing issue that you just brought up. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, people around the city are talking about issues that before were so complex and so strange to them that they couldn't get a handle on it.
That's right.
And now people are starting to talk about testing, for example.
Right.
I hear people on the street or people in my neighbor here at the Heartland Cafe over in the Buffalo Bar, talking about testing and what's wrong with over-reliance on testing. And
yeah, you're right. And the conversations that we heard people having that were pretty evolved around, so they evaluate teachers this way, or they put this much weight on distance traveled by students in their classrooms.
Yes.
And that was very educational.
Right. And it's interesting because, according to the state law, teachers are not allowed to bargain over any issues except wages and benefits. It's illegal, really. And yet they managed to do it. I mean, because when you've got 30,000 people out in the streets every day, you have the power to negotiate any damn thing you want.
Well, this was really a pretty phenomenal deal, this strike.
Yes.
And congratulations to all the teachers out there and
to the principals who were supportive. Some of them were.
All the parents that were supportive, all the city folks who were supportive, which was a lot.
Well, I've been involved in a lot of strikes, and over the last many years, even going back to when my kids were in public schools here, I've never seen a situation where a strike of teachers has gotten so much parent support.
Yeah.
According to the Capital Facts surveys, some 63% of parents supported the strike. And when I was out on the picket lines, like, for example, over at Clemente High School last week, it seemed like every car passing by, taxis, buses, trucks, were all honking their horns in support. It was amazing.
Mike, what do you attribute that support to? I mean, a lot of times, we've had strikes before, but I don't remember the kind of groundswell of community support.
No.
And even the consciousness of the teachers on strike that we had in this situation.
Right.
I think it was because despite a multi-million-dollar ad campaign, which the mayor ran, and by the way is still running every day.
I want to talk about that in a minute.
Yes. People instinctively could tell that the teachers were not just about self-interest in this strike. They were talking about, for example, the size of classes, keeping classroom sizes down to a reasonable scale, And that appeals to parents. Parents don't want their kids to be just a number in a big class or a big school,
Sure.
to bring back the small schools issue. So I think that's why the strike got so much support. I know in the neighborhood where I live, over in Logan Square, we had 3 or 4 organizations organizing parents and doing educational work. I think the same was on the South Side with COCO and a lot of other community-based organizations.
Well, even in the mainstream press, they talked a lot about the community organizations that got behind this strike.
Right.
And what was the difference in the organizing? Is it something internal in the union, or is it something in our collective consciousness of the times? We had always said, just take it to the presidential election, if we get Obama in, we're going to have to push him from the bottom to make him do stuff. I think we tended to lay back. But maybe people realize now it's the time that the community involvement, maybe it's because the economic crisis has hit a lot of people and they're organizing differently. What's your take on it?
Well, one thing is, one thing you hit on is the new leadership in the Chicago Teachers Union. I mean, you have to understand that this strike could have never taken place without the movement that was created within the Teachers Union by the Core Caucus. And these are mostly young activists, organizers, who waged a struggle against a kind of a do-nothing leadership, which typifies a lot of the teachers' unions around the country.
Which Ben Jarafsky...
Ben's my guy. I mean, he's been writing some terrific stuff in the Reader.
Always.
And thank you, the Reader, for publishing them.
Yes. And so that was one factor. The other factor is that the crisis in the communities is getting so bad. It's leading to rising violence, an unbelievable murder rate among youth, that's really escalated since this current mayor has taken office. It's up 38% over last year. And I think that community-based organizations are really taking seriously the role that schools play in the community. Schools are more or less and always have been a safe haven for kids.
Yeah.
And when you start closing schools in the neighborhood and moving kids from one neighborhood to another to go to school, violence increases.
Yeah.
And so I think parents and community people have been taking a much greater interest in what's going on here and have seen the union as a valuable ally to have. I mean, it's a powerful force. It's one of the few remaining unions left in the United States, as a matter of fact.
Well, that's the other thing I was going to talk to you about was union, the unionization or lack thereof of the workforce in general.
Yes.
I mean, part of why parents got involved and communities got involved was the schools were failing our students for many, many years, and the local school council model that came out with school reform in '86, I believe, the year before Washington died, has not panned out the way it was pictured. There are some schools that have great LSCs, real activists. And then there are many people in Chicago who have never participated in an LSC election, don't even know what they are, and there's very little press about them. There's very little organizing about those.
Right. Well, we've seen really since the beginning of local school councils has been an attempt on the part of of CPS,
the administration,
and especially in the last couple of decades under mayoral control, when Chicago became the first city where the schools were placed under control of the mayor, to take back the power from the local school councils.
Yeah.
The local school councils represented a move towards decentralization of authority.
And inviting community into the schools.
And inviting communities into the schools and giving parents a lot of say in what happens in their schools. And now that's almost completely been reversed.
Yep.
And the local school councils have been completely defunded. So that's why you have the situation that you have.
So it helped. It helped create the kind of support that non-union members of the community had for this strike.
Yeah.
I'm thinking.
While we're at it, I want to give a little pitch, if I can.
Oh, certainly.
A lot of these issues that you're raising are going to be discussed next Thursday evening, where we're having as a guest speaker, Jonathan Kozol, the renowned author of Savage Inequalities, which was a book that really turned my head around, and it became a bestseller. And Jonathan's got a new book out now called Fire in the Ashes, and he's on a speaking tour.
The Fire in the Ashes.
Fire in the Ashes, yeah. And
25 years among the poorest children in America.
exactly. And Jonathan is raising the most important issue, I think, affecting our schools, which is the issue of poverty. I mean, this is what's driving, for example, test scores. Everybody's so concerned about test scores. We know that the test scores correlate most closely to poverty, and much more so than anything that goes on in the schools. So Jonathan's going to be speaking about that Thursday night at 6 o'clock over at Northwestern University Law School Thorne Auditorium, which is at 375 East Chicago Avenue. And the admission is free, but you can get tickets to make sure you have a seat reserved by going online to ctunet.com. And the union, Chicago Teachers Union, is co-sponsoring this event. And in fact,
In Evanston.
No.
no, this is
downtown.
Chicago.
Downtown.
This is at the law school,
That's Chicago.
375
I gotta
East
get it
Chicago
straight.
Avenue. And CTU President Karen Lewis, who's become legendary now for leading this strike, she's going to be introducing Jonathan. And I'm going to be introducing Karen. So,
Oh, well, we're coming for sure then.
so all my fans out there, be sure and
You know, when I was a Mundelein College student, I studied in Mexico for a semester in Ivan Illich's school in Cuernavaca, and at that point in time, 1970, he was doing something called Deschooling Society. And
Right.
Jonathan Kozol was one of our seminar leaders, actually. I met him as a 20-year-old, and we had him over to dinner, as we would have each of our great leaders, intellectual leaders, come over. And I'm just grateful that Jonathan has stayed with the struggle, because his uninterrupted history line of many years of following what is happening to public education in the U.S. is
Well, yeah,
very valuable.
It's great. You mentioned Ivan Illich, Paulo Freire, Jonathan Kozol. These are legendary
John Holt,
educators. John
Everett
Holt,
Reimer.
Deborah Meyer. These are all the great names in the past, but people don't know who they are now,
No.
especially the young teachers that I teach.
That's right.
So in my class at DePaul now, we're reading Savage Inequalities, and I'm bringing my whole class to hear Jonathan speak.
In case you just tuned in, you are listening to WLUW's Live from the Heartland show, brought to you every Saturday morning from the stage at the Heartland Cafe. And we are here talking with Michael Klonsky, a good friend, an educator, an activist. And one of the things I want to bring up is the former head of the Chicago schools, Arnie Duncan. A number of us became kind of disillusioned with him while he had his role here, and then all of a sudden the president appointed him to be head of education for the country. I know that the teachers at the lab school, where actually Duncan came out of, were not happy with his direction. What does it say about his policies and the policies that he's tried to push nationally with this strike here, and the kind of issues that have been raised?
You know, one of the limitations on the strike was that, as I pointed out before, was that they couldn't speak to a lot of issues. They weren't allowed to negotiate a lot of issues, and the reason is because things like teacher evaluation are written into state law. And the reason that they're written into state law, the reason that teachers have to be evaluated on the basis of test scores, and the reason that they're closing so many schools, at least one of the main reasons, is that it's mandated by Arnie Duncan's law, I call it. Arnie Duncan's law is called Race to the Top. And in order to get federal funds here into Chicago and into the state of Illinois, we have to abide by Duncan's law. And if you apply for federal funds, you have to tell Arnie Duncan, yes, we promise to close schools. We promise to fire thousands of teachers. We promise to violate union contracts. We have to do all those things. And so a lot of the issues around the strike started in the Department of Education with Arnie Duncan.
Wow.
Speaking of Arnie Duncan and laws, we have a mayor who came in, and a lot of people didn't really know where he was going to take us.
But they voted for him anyway.
Yeah, they did, and he's sort of taken us on on an anti-union path. And one of the things he did was to try to kind of undermine the teachers union, the Chicago Teachers Union, early on by getting a law passed through the state legislature that said that the teachers needed, I think, 70% or 75%.
75%.
And no one thought they could do it. No one thought they could pull it off, and they did.
You mean to vote
for the strike vote? For the strike vote.
Yes, that's.
So let's talk about the mayor first with that and where he's trying to go.
Yes.
Do we have to? No, just
we're going
kidding.
to talk. Yeah, over the next
let's
few
talk
weeks,
about
we're
the
going to
mayor.
talk about a lot.
You know, this national campaign against unions, to bust unions,
which started with Ronald Reagan in 1980.
right? But more recently has been spearheaded by these Tea Party governors in Wisconsin, in Ohio, Florida, Michigan, who've been trying to force through legislation to ban public employee unions altogether.
Right.
But these have all been led by Republican, conservative Tea Party types. Here in Chicago, Rahm Emanuel, a Democrat, has been pushing the same kind of legislation and the same kind of policies in order to weaken public employees unions.
Chicago Democrats have always looked like Republicans.
You're right.
I mean, really.
Some of them.
No, really, most of them.
You're right.
With the exception of Harold Washington, most of our mayors have, Jane Byrne for one brief shining moment,
right,
called herself an independent, but as soon as she got scared by the boys,
even Byrne, Mayor Washington, even the Dailies, never
took the unions on.
Never attacked the unions the way this mayor is doing. And he's become toxic, not only politically here in Chicago, but nationally for the Democratic Party. I heard Don Rose, I think, talking the other day, our great...
Don Rose will be on this show on October 20th.
Yeah.
He said, first of all, that what Mayor Emanuel has done is basically eliminated himself from any talk about running for president or vice president in 2016.
That's for sure.
The second thing he's done is he's created a terrible situation for President Obama and the Democrats, because he said, you can probably win a presidential election without much union support, but you can't win it with union opposition. If the unions go against you, not only nationally, but here in Illinois, a lot of our politicians like Governor Quinn, and even Mayor Emanuel himself are going to have a hell of a tough time getting reelected if the unions, turn on them.
Well, just on that note, I got to say that I was down at the State Fair for Democrat Day, Governor's Day, and
Yes.
For me,
What
it
a
was a
scene.
sad situation. I was at an event the night before, and there were plenty of union people, Danny Davis, the governor, etc. But actually, at the fair, AFSCME and other unions came out really protesting the governor.
That's right.
And as much as the governor would would like to avoid it, I think they both need each other. So I am hopeful that in the years to come, there'll be some rapprochement and some policy changes, but that's a tricky subject.
Well, as long
I'd just love to see AFSCME come down as hard on Michael Madigan, who's had more to do with
Right.
their
problems.
Well, actually, Madigan, Quinn, Emanuel, and almost all of Chicago Democrats have been kind of rolling over the teachers' pension fund. They're trying to basically take away our pensions. I speak personally here, and I don't think there's going to be any rapprochement as long as Democrats are leading the fight to take away teachers' pension, Medicare payments, and things like that. So, tough break.
Well, we're working here in the 49th Ward Democrats to make sure we're on the good side of this
Well, you should tell your alderman here.
We're working on him,
You
too.
should tell your alderman here that stop attacking the teachers' union.
I did notice that there was a progressive caucus of aldermen who put out a statement in
right.
support of the teachers, and I did notice that my alderman did not sign that letter.
Right. A few aldermen found their spine and stood up for the
It's like
teachers.
7 of them.
But the rest, including yours, he's going to be in trouble. And I hope he gets in trouble over this. He's got to find his spine and not be such a toady to the mayor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's up with that?
Sorry to
Oh, I understand. It is
that's what I
definitely
believe.
something that people are talking about. There's
We're
no
going to
doubt
put the
about
heat
that.
on him. I'll tell you. We'll be in his office. We'll be pushing him.
So, of course, I'm still going to work to elect Obama because,
Of course,
Mitt
because the
Romney.
alternative is so horrific. Yeah.
And people, it's scaring me the way the news has been going lately and saying, oh, well, the numbers are turning Barack's way and all this sort of thing, and people will get complacent, and you cannot do that in this nation because the racists are out there doing their thing.
Yeah, but we got to
Big
do.
time.
We got to. Got to
Big
vote for
time.
Obama, but we also got to save Obama. We can't just be spectators.
No, that's for sure.
That's right.
Politics.
That's exactly right.
We don't just be political on election day.
Thank
No,
you.
I
We
hear
got to
you.
get the people out in the streets. We got to organize. We got to fight for the things that we want Obama to do. And I think he's gotten off way too easy these last 4 years.
Yeah, no, you're right about that, and his exercising leadership is hardly recognizable to people because his version is more legislative, going into the Congress and making nice with these people who will just slit his throat the next
And Arnie
moment.
Duncan couldn't be doing the things he's doing without Obama's okay. So on education issues, the Democrats and Republicans, there's not a shade of difference between.
Why do you think that is?
I think it's largely because, number one, I think they buy into the corporate school agenda. Democrats and Republicans do, and they get a lot of their financing from a group called Democrats for Education Reform, which are very rich and very powerful.
Are these the people that are running the ads for the mayor?
I'm just going to get to that. These are guys like Whitney Tilson, who's a big hedge fund operator in New York. A guy named Ravenel. Get this, Ravenel Boykin the Fourth.
Holy
I think I left out one of his names.
Two. I like those two names.
Yeah. He's another one, a billionaire hedge funder who, for some reason or another, have decided that school vouchers, privately managed charter schools are good for business. And they give millions and millions of dollars to the Democratic Party, and now they're paying for all the ads, all the anti-union ads that Rahm Emanuel is running every morning. I woke up yesterday morning and there's the mayor's face at 7 o'clock in the morning telling me how terrible the union is and how all the great things that he's doing in Chicago schools.
Okay, so where is the union at right now? Where is the contract at? We had a lot of teachers meeting here during the strike, talking. It was activism, participatory democracy. They're pushing this fair union contract. What is the status of the contract?
Well, the contract represented a great victory for the union. I mean, they were able to roll back this attack on teachers. They didn't get everything that they wanted, and of course they couldn't get everything they wanted, but considering the power and the forces that they were up against, I mean, really the power of the whole ruling elite in this country was going against them. And as was the trend towards compromise from union leaders around the country. Considering all that, the contract turned out to be a great victory. And I say that because, number one, they prevented the teacher evaluation from being completely done on the basis of student standardized test scores. That was a great victory.
Yes.
Number two, they kept a lid on expanding class size. Number three, they got back the raise that was taken away from them in the last election. So teachers are not going to have to work Rahm's longer school day for no pay increase. And for many, many other reasons, the contract was great. I mean, there was things in the contract that shouldn't even have been negotiated, that shouldn't even had to be negotiated and fought for. For example, one of the things that the teachers union won after months of hard-fought struggle was that kids should have their textbooks on the first day of school. I was shocked that this would even have to be teachers have to go on strike for a week to get textbooks in the schools, you know. And I don't think this would have ever happened in a school district up on the North Shore.
You got that right.
Yeah. So another one was that teachers get reimbursed $225 for the money that they lay out for school supplies. You know, I don't know one teacher in Chicago that doesn't lay out hundreds of dollars each year.
I even did it when I was teaching college.
Right, but now they get reimbursed $225. But I mean, this took a tremendous battle on the part of the union. So overall, I think the contract was a great victory, especially when you consider that many of the things that they won were banned from negotiations by Senate Bill 7. Yes.
That's Mike, how do you think that this recent contract, which I know they'll have to really keep struggling to make sure it's applied as it's written, what kind of impact do you think this is going to have on other union struggles, not only in the city but beyond?
Well, tremendous impact. First of all, let me tell you that a contract is only a contract. I mean, there's only so many things you can win in a contract negotiation. Now you have to go downstate and you have to fight to roll back Senate Bill 7, and you have to stop the other pieces of legislation like around teachers' pensions and things like that, that are a threat to teachers that couldn't be negotiated in the union. Mm-hmm. But to the question that you raised, Mike, I don't know if you noticed, but in the last week, I think 4 suburban teachers schools have gone out on strike and fighting around many of the same issues that the CTU fought for. An interesting happened to us, my brother and I. My brother Fred is
he's an active dude.
He's a retired teacher now and a former union president out in Park Ridge. And he's been blogging like me and writing, tweeting, and a lot of things.
The two of you.
I like the graphics on his.
You just can't help
Now he's tuning. In fact, he tunes from the Red Line Tap, which is right next door here. Yeah, so people should read that. But Fred has his coffee at Pete's Coffee Shop over by North Avenue on Saturday mornings on his way to shopping. So and.
Did he have him turn on this radio show?
Well, I hope so. He's gotten to be friends with some of the baristas or whatever they call them at Pete's.
Sure.
And they're having their own union struggle, their own labor struggle at Pete's. Trying to get a fair.
Oh, I saw
deal.
A picture of that.
Yeah. So what happens? The day the strike ended, they got a bunch of us, and my brother led it. A bunch of us to go down to Pete's and put up signs in the doorway while they were meeting with their employees, asking them to get a fair deal for Pete's workers. So all of you, if you ever go to Pete's, if you can't make it to the Heartland for coffee, make sure you put the heat on them over there. But nationally, yes, this is going to have a big impact on contract negotiations all over the country. One thing I saw that was really interesting was the support that we got from the police.
Oh yeah.
I mean, we were marching. We were marching the other day up through the West Side. Thousands of us. I think 25,000 teachers and supporters. And the police were wearing. We're holding up traffic and letting us through, and wearing CTU buttons, hugging teachers, and because
maybe they can move their leadership.
Maybe they can move their leadership.
Side.
But the fact of the matter is that all public employees unions are going to be affected by what happened here in Chicago last week. Yes.
We're running out of time,
good work.
I want to thank you, Michael Klonsky, for coming on. How about giving people a place they can contact you, and then I'm going to give a few announcements.
They can contact me. Google Mike Klonsky's Small Talk blog. You can read it every morning. Follow me on Twitter. You can contact me at smallschoolsworkshop@yahoo.com. And don't forget, Thursday night, Jonathan Kozol at the Northwestern Law School on Chicago Avenue, the Thorne Auditorium, and be there at 6 o'clock, and we'll see you all then.
Okay, now a couple of things coming up that people might want to know about. There is currently an exhibit up on the wall here at the Heartland of Heartland Historical Photos, and that will be up for another week or so. And then we are really honored that we're going to have our brothers and sisters from Salcedo Press, and they're going to come in with a 40-year retrospective poster exhibit, and that will be up through the 9th of November, so it will inspire us through the election period. There will be a reception Sunday, October 14th, 3 to 5. Next week, we're going to have a really interesting lineup. We've got David Orr, the Cook County Clerk, who's been a wonderful activist, elected official, and he's going to talk about the status of the voter suppression and pushback against it. We're going to have Katie's goddaughter, my daughter, Casey Blue James, talking about poetry and reading some of her poetry. And we are really excited that we're going to have Eddie, the Chief Clearwater, the blues man. He's going to come on the show. We'll see if he'll do anything live, but we're certainly going to hear some of his tunes. We want to thank everybody who makes this show possible. There's a lot of us involved these days. There's Angel Herrera, there's Paul and Mary Wozniak, there's Lisa Smith, Laura Herman, Jay Sarate, Eli Sloan, Daniel Kugler. And we'll be back next week, so have a good week. Do good in the world. The world needs all that you do. All power to the people. Over and out.
Right on.